everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Talk to Tot. Real people, real talk, real life. I am your host, Tatiana Monet, coming at you with another amazing content filled episode. I do want to say shout out to my listeners who continue to just endure what I have to say. And I hope that the information and the stories that I put out really resonate with people, and you're able to feel like you have a voice, or you're also able to say, you know what, I never thought of that, maybe that applies to me, or this is something to be mindful of. I do want to give a quick shout out to my alma mater, Clark Atlanta University. Specifically, I'm wearing the the shirt right now. You can't see it if you're listening to Apple Podcasts, but I went to Clark Atlanta University, and right now the shirt I'm wearing represents living on campus. So because I was a part of the residence life staff temporarily. So yeah, shout out to the CAU Panthers. I love you. I'm a proud Panther of an HBCU. And I am excited for homecoming this year. This is the 10-year anniversary of the class of 2014 graduating, and it's also the 10-year anniversary of one of my organizations that I'm a part of, SUAD, me being a member there, and I was the ace of my line. Shout out to that. But anyway, so what I have this week to talk about is it's a twofold type of concept where you are enduring some unfavorable things, specifically titled Constraint and Restraint. The reason why I wanted to talk about this topic on this episode is because when I'm conversing with other people, or even just having moments of self-reflection, I'm often dismayed and just irritated, really, when I'm put in situations where I have to deal with something that I didn't bring on myself, something that comes off as very limiting and constricting, and I have to adapt under forced conditions, and I don't like that, and I'm like, okay, well, let me understand this better. Why is it something that I have a negative response to? Where do things like this come from? Is it about me, or is there a bigger picture? Blah blah blah. And when I was thinking of this mentality and the situations that apply to it, the two words that kept revolving in my head were constraint and restraint. And because I am a knowledge seeker and I like to get to the root of things, I was like, well, let me look up the definition of these words. So per Google, because that's what I utilize. For constraint, it says it's a limitation or a restriction. So that applies to the mentality that I had when I was conceptualizing what was going on. I feel very constricted. I feel very limited. I feel like I am not at liberty to exude the things within me to the best of my ability. I have to go about it a certain type of way, and it's not a way that I prefer. And then looking up the definition of restraint, there were two. So the first one says a measure or condition that keeps someone or something under control or within limits. It seems kind of dominating, right? Like something has a hold over you, or it has some type of dominion over you. You're not fully free to be. And then the second definition of it is it's unemotional, dispassionate, or moderate behavior, where you're exercising self-control. Now, when I think of restraint, at first I thought of it in a negative connotation. Like I have to be restrained. I have to be held against my will. I have to resist this urge that I deserve to act out. The more I started practicing restraint without identifying it as restraint up front, until I started looking into the word, I started looking at it in another way, where more so to the second part of the definition where it says self-control, I have full governance over how I respond. So I'm choosing higher ground. I'm choosing the path of least resistance, the lesser of two evils, whatever have you. And when I tie all of that together, I look at it like this. Oftentimes we're put in situations where we do not choose the outcome. We don't choose the players involved. We don't choose the scenario. We're just here. We just show up, right? Because we're given a certain amount of days on this earth where they're naturally going to be complicated. And what we decide to do with those days, with those people, with those situations, it can either amplify or lessen the complications. So how do you release all the tension? Release all the tension. For anybody that danced with me on my team, House Arrest 2, Championship Dance Team Incorporated, the Hypnotic chapter, which is chapter 10, based out of Atlanta, one of the old head skits, you will know what I mean when I say release all the tension. So how do you do that? Well, for one, it starts with your mentality, right? I feel like I sound like my therapist, because sometimes she'd be like, right, when she says certain things and she's explaining to me, she'd be like, right. So shout out to my therapist, Yolanda Dunn. Y'all see about her. She's also a Clark Atlanta graduate, and among other things. So if you're looking for a therapist, especially one that's virtual and you're in the Atlanta area or elsewhere, it doesn't matter, look up Yolanda Dunn. Anyway, and when I think of that concept, I see myself in a situation where I'm the nucleus, and whatever is trying to penetrate my cell wall, I have full access and control over what gets in and what goes out. That wasn't my initial thought process, though, because when I was put in conditions that I felt like I was in a bind, like I was in bondage, my first instinct was to fight, was to be aggressive, was to be reactive. And when I kept encountering the same types of experiences, I was like, okay, how do I get out of this loop? Prime example, I was expressing to my mom some complications at a job that I work, and it was more so with the people. And I was like, how come I'm always running into people who try to sun me, in a sense? And what I mean by that is, even if I look younger than you, or if I'm shorter than you, or the fact that I am younger than you, you try to make me your child. You try to talk to me like I'm a kid, like I'm your kid, like I'm your little sister. And it's like, I'm a whole adult. Who you talking to? I'm in this environment just like you are. So let's talk to one another on the same playing field, especially if we have the same title. I mean, come on. You're not my superior. And I don't even like the word superior. You're not my supervisor or my manager. You're definitely not my master. I only have one of those. So watch how you talk to me. And I got tired of looping through the same type of issue, and it made me feel small. So when you're in situations of constraint, you feel bound, you feel less than, you feel angry, because you're like, I'm not at liberty to do what I need to do to be able to shift, to be able to escape this moment. And when I started looking into situations like that deeper, and I'll get into restraint in a minute, but as far as constraint, when I started altering my mindset, doing more self-analyzation, emotional regulation, self-governance, my interpretation of me being in those situations started to change in a number of ways. And I'll explain a few. The first one is me in that situation. I had to differentiate, is this happening to me or is this happening for me? If you listen to previous episodes, you'll hear that term, because it really does matter. And it applies to more than just one type of scenario. I also had to look at the people involved. Okay, this is not about me. There's a bigger picture here. So I don't have to take this on. Granted, it's not lay down, be a rug, and let people walk all over you, but I don't have to own whatever they're giving to me. I don't need it. It's kind of like someone offering you a sample and you're like, oh no thank you. Like in the mall, you're like, no thank you, I don't want that. It's the same concept. This is not mine. You could keep all that energy that you have. It don't belong to me. I'm good over here. And then also looking at the situation like, what lesson do I need to pull out of this? Because I'm not always in control of what goes on around me. I'm only in control of me, not the people, not the place, the things, none of that. Like, the element that I have absolute control over is myself. So because I know that, instead of me trying to make all of those restraining external forces conform to me, I don't have to worry about none of that. I can move around. I can shift, And when I started looking at constraint in another way, it also broadened my mind for me to think on a spiritual level. Like, okay, why am I here? That goes back to the lesson part that I was talking about. What is it that God wants me to know? What test do I need to pass so that it could be a part of my testimony? What trial or tribulation do I need to endure so that I can triumph out of it? Whether it's for me or if it's for someone else that needs to benefit from my story. Because sometimes what we go through is not for us either. It's for other people. And sometimes our successes are like that as well, which that's actually a good idea to talk about in another episode, is success and the layers of that, and sometimes who it can be for. Yeah, I'm going to write that down so that I can remember. I'll just write success. Anyway, so my mindset had to shift in order for me to better adapt to those situations of constraint, and having a better ideology helped me with my temperament. And then it helped me release all the tension when faced with a limitation, because instead of me feeling like, and I didn't master this, but it's a shift in progress. Instead of me looking at it as I am held back, it's more so like, what am I being shielded from? For those of you all that have some type of spiritual or religious affiliation, you are probably familiar with the concept of God or Jesus carrying you through the storm. So you might feel like you're going through a lot, but the fact that he's guiding you through all of it, so you could be going through more than what you're really going through, type of thing. That's the mindset. That's the concept in my mind that I am adopting. Is like, okay, not only could it be worse, but this is designing me to be able to handle something bigger than this moment. And this limitation is, if you look at it from the surface level, it would only rest there as a limitation or a restriction. But when you look deeper into it, this is really something designed for me to be patient and wait, exercising that virtue to be able to say, okay, this right here is something small. When something more complex and maybe more impactful in my life happens, I'm better equipped to withstand it, to avert it, to figure it out and succeed. Not just get past it, and take the damage, but also to be able to overcome it. Okay. I like that. But it doesn't always feel that way, especially in the heat of the moment, right? When you are in a bind and you just feel like you have no wiggle room, kind of like when bills are piling up on you, or you're stuck in traffic, or you are in a relationship that it's really complicated to communicate with the person and to get on the same page. You just feel like you're not in your element. You're out of whack and you don't have options. It reminds me of our humanity. The fact that we have the right to choose and that we have our own free will. Everyone exercises their own free will in their own way. And that can sometimes get in the way of other people's path, if they allow it. It's a lot of layers to that. And that's why I wanted to really expand on this topic, because it shows up in how we treat one another. And we're still talking about constraint. I didn't get to restraint yet. When you encounter someone and, like, for instance, if you're at a restaurant, there's a server and they're just rude to you and you're like, what the heck? You know, or you meet somebody in a store, or you encounter them in a store and you're like, who's spitting your bean curd? What is wrong with you? You know what I mean? If you watch Mulan, you know where that came from. And we have to realize, not that we have to feed into it, but we have to realize that as our life is lifing and things are going on, everybody else is too. So we're running into people with having a bad day. We're running into people who have jacked up personalities, and we still have to assimilate. Some stuff we're not supposed to feed into, but we do naturally because we're human. I mean, we're not going to get it right all the time. But if you want to live better, you have to think different. You have to do better. And like one of the things that my ex used to say all the time was, in order to get what you've never had, you got to do what you've never done. And that mentality, you know, it rings in my head. You know what I mean? So I'm like, okay, I'm tired of looping through this situation. One of the things that my parents always taught me was stop and think. Do I always do it? No. But stop and think. Because 9 times out of 10, once you think about something, even though you may still have some type of emotional connection to it, you'll have a more rational response versus being reactive and solely relying on emotion. And all of that is right. And all of that applies to this, because when people feel like they're in a bind and they're in a containment, it can sometimes bring out the savage in you. And like I said, I had to study myself. And I'm a firm believer in, the more you get to know yourself, the better understanding you have of the world around you and the people in it. I think that's very true. Because then you're able to make a distinction. You're able to differentiate. And when I see a lot of people moving around, I'm able to point out, that's a hurt person. Or that person's going through something. This person is sad. This person has self-confidence and self-love. I'm able to distinguish all of that. And when I encounter people who have a lot stacked up against them, you know, they have a lot holding them down and suffocating them, they act differently. Some people shut down. They disconnect. Some people are good at not showing it at all. But a lot of the times when we are running into those who act out, like act a plump fool, they just real ignorant. When you really get a chance to hear some of those people's stories, which a lot of times we might see it on social media or television, whatever, they're going through something. They're just not handling it well. Either because their nature versus nurture is jacked up, or they just don't care. They just have no act right. And you got some of those too. But once I became more aware of it and I started looking at it differently, I was able to better respond to people. Like, kind of like rubber, it bounces right off. Like, I've had people who are just, the old me probably would have hit them in the face. But because I'm in a different place mentally, because I am training my mind and I'm disciplining myself, I'm able to look at them differently and be like, one, I'm not going to own none of what you have. It's yours. Two, I'm not going to let it contaminate my healing journey and my emotional health. And three, I'm actually inclined to help. Because a lot of times when people are in a bind and that constraint is at its all-time high, they just need help. I know the feeling. When I feel like things are stacked up against me and I am very limited, I am very restricted, when I feel like I have no way out, I want to explode. All I want is help. All I want is to have my load lightened. And one of our duties as a Christian is to love thy neighbor and help and stuff like that. Within means. That part should have been in there. Within means in the Bible. But that, I'm doing what I want with that. I'm going to put within means. Because you're not supposed to let your cup be empty, especially if other people ain't pouring into you, but that's another story. But yeah, now when I see people like that, not only can I identify with them, but I can respond in a way where I could just do my part as a fellow human being, because we've lost that sense of it takes a village. You know what I mean? So with the concept of constraint, if you activate a healthier, more favorable mindset that's conducive to the way that you live, you'll see your problems differently. And it's a rewarding state to be in. Like, for me to have transitioned from one work industry to another, make roughly the same amount of money, even though it's kind of like up in the air on what type of money I'll make that day because I'm in hospitality. But the fact that I make roughly the same amount of money, have more time on my hands to pour into myself, pour into my businesses, pour into other aspects of my life, it helped me with my mindset. And because my other job, well, the other industry that I worked in didn't allow that wiggle room, it had a lot of constraints in that, I had to make a shift. If you're not ready to make a shift, because when you're in a constraint, you may not have your situation lined up where the situation itself or the people involved will create some type of release. Understand that. So you have to be the change agent. You have to make the difference. Be the change you want to see, basically. Even when you feel like you don't have enough to give, like, a little goes a long way. And the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. I'm a living example of that. So my advice to anyone that feels like I have reached my limit, I'm always going through something, I'm looping through the same struggles all the time, or every aspect of my life is falling apart and I just feel like I have no room to come up for air. Work on what you can change, which is your mindset. You have to start there. Having some type of outlet, whether it's God, having a prayer closet, your hobbies, whatever have you. Tap into those. Tap into you, because that's where it starts. A lot of times the problems that you have can be viewed differently and handled better once you have a better handle on yourself. And not to say that you're out of control, but you are more discerning of how you respond to things, so that way you are kind of promoting a better outcome for yourself. Even if you don't know exactly what it's going to be, you're setting it up so that it's a better not response, a better situation of resolve. I guarantee it. And even if you encounter some type of resistance from other people, you won't feed into it as much. Like, each time that you do it, you won't be as affected. I think that's the best way to describe it. It's kind of like your skin is getting thicker, like you have mental skin. And I know I'm making some references that are like, what? But this is just how my mind works sometimes. Oh well. But I feel like you can have thick skin in the mind as well, not just your heart. So how you interpret things, it really does matter. Moving from constraint, restraint. And they're both connected, because you can feel like you're being restrained in a situation that is a constraint. So a situation that limits you, you can feel like you are being held back, like you're under control of something else, or you have no control. And the funny part about it is, restraint, how it can be looked at in two ways, is that you can either have control by exercising restraint, or something can be restraining you, which means it has control over you, which can feel like you're in a situation of constraint, because that restraint produces its own limitations. and restrictions. Ha 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 ha. It's a lot, right? So with restraint, when I was in a headspace where I had a more negative connotation of restraint, I felt like anytime something happened to me, it took some of my power away. And that's a me thing. That's a me thing, because people can't take your power. You allow them to have it. So I had to change my mindset. And I keep putting emphasis on that, because not only is the mind a terrible thing to waste, but it's the most powerful weapon that you can ever have. And not only is it a weapon, it's a tool, it's a resource, it's an asset. And it can appreciate, but it can also depreciate if you don't cultivate it, nurture it, and help it grow. Like, you have to go through conditioning. If anyone is an athlete out there, or a former athlete like I am, when you are training, you have to go through conditioning. That is a term that a lot of us, we take a deep breath, sigh, and look to the side on, because it's like, oh Lord, my body finna ache. Like, it don't feel good. But once you endure that process, you come out stronger, and you're able to handle more. And how you handle it, it's this commercial that I saw. Two sisters were running in the forest, and they got to the car. Really, the commercial was about the car, but whatever. And one of the sisters was more fit than the other. And so the sister that was least fit, she said, man, does this get any easier? And the sister that was fit said, no, you just get stronger. So that endurance, that perseverance comes with you putting yourself in these situations of constraint and forcing yourself to overcome it and to adapt. And when you look at being restrained, sometimes it can put you in a situation to evolve, which then shifts you to the other mentality of restraint, which means you have full self-control. You are resisting the urge to act out of character. You are preventing yourself from showing out, from snapping. You are seeing that there is a bigger picture, and you're like, you know what? I don't have to do that. I don't have to explain myself. I don't have to have the last laugh. I don't have to get the last word. There's nothing to win here. This is not a battle. You know what I mean? The war is already won. So there's no need. Forget it. F it. That's where I'm getting to. I'm almost there fully, but I'm not where I used to be. And I'm very proud of that. And that's why I have a different attitude about things. When things affect me, I respond in a different way. And some stuff don't even affect me no more. And you see that difference. You don't wear it so much. It doesn't show in your face, or in your posture, or in how you live, how you treat yourself. And exercising that type of restraint where you are resisting a negative urge, it takes a lot of strength. It doesn't come easy, and it's not for the faint of heart, because you have to go through so much to get it. A buddy of mine was telling me that they had a lot of violence that they were exposed to during most of their adolescence and young adulthood. And now they're in a situation where they're like super peaceful and stuff like that. And they said, under no circumstances will I allow someone to tarnish or deactivate my peace, because I've gone through so much to obtain it. That is exercising restraint. Even when I am challenged, met with opposition within means, I don't have to resort to a lesser version of myself. I don't have to go back to somewhere I've evolved from. And the more I understood it and lived it out, the more I developed an appreciation for having restraint. Because think about, okay, so I watched on Disney Plus, it's a show, a limited series called, I think it's Limitless, with Chris Hemsworth. If y'all have not watched that, and I know it came out already, but it's awe-inspiring. It looks at the body and life in so many layers. One in particular, I think it's like a 6-part series. They were talking about evolution and how as a species is able to adapt what their cells and what their bodies undergo in order to make certain adaptations so that they can survive in their environment. And when I was looking at that, I was listening into it, meaning, how does this apply to my life? And that's just the type of mindset that I have, is what can I take out of this for my benefit? And outside of the information, because it was really cool information. And I was like, wow, that's just like how a person exhibits growth. When we are put in uncomfortable situations and we adapt to it, we rise to the occasion, we rise above it, we're evolving. The same things that trigger us, that used to trigger us, don't trigger us anymore. The same things that make us mad or sad don't have the same profound effect on us like they used to. It's a sign of growth. It doesn't take away if you care about something, but it means that you're not governed by that emotion. It doesn't have control over you. It doesn't have that restraint, that other aspect of restraint on you. It's not restraining you from where you're trying to go and where you're trying to elevate to. And I think it's kind of dope how certain words are set up like that, where depending on how you look at it, you can get more than one meaning out of it. And because I like to break words down and look into them, that helped me better understand my situations, when I'm met with opposition, when there's tension in the room, when I'm just feeling a certain type of way, getting to the root of that. And that's why those two words kept popping into my head, constraint and restraint, because constraint more so applied to the situations that I was in, and the restraint was whether I felt like something had control over me or if I'm the one that exercised the control. Pretty deep stuff. My hope is that more people are conscientious of how they do what they do, how they say what they say. I know that you can't fully control perception of others, but you can definitely be a guiding force. And I say that because, yes, it's liberating to live in a way where you're unapologetic in what you do. But because we are all still exposed to one another and have to live amongst each other, we have to have some type of common ground, some type of act right. And that comes from people having some type of self-governance, some type of regulation, some type of restraint to separate us from savages, from non-domesticated animals. I mean, and some people might not think that it's that deep, but when you really look at it, chaos can exist beyond just some type of catastrophic event. Things can be chaotic in how they're handled. Think about whatever work situation you hated the most. One of the words you would probably use to describe it is, it was very chaotic. It was very disorganized. Nothing was ran properly. Things weren't managed effectively. You know what I mean? When you look at all of that, that means that job, that environment was a situation of constraint. And what you had to undergo and who was involved as key players were restraining. And you had to exercise restraint to not act out, to not put yourself in a situation where you're burning a bridge, or now you done caught a case because you done damaged people's property, or you done fought somebody, whatever, had to be the bigger person. All of that connects. It all connects. So as I wrap this episode up, and I know it was rather short compared to ones that I normally do, I challenge all of you who tune in to this episode to take a second look at what you're going through. Take a deeper look into who you are and how all of this connects. Your emotion runs parallel to everyone else's. And even though sometimes things can overlap, you have more control over the direction of the overlapping and what comes into your path than you think you do. Especially if you change your mindset and you discipline your emotions. It doesn't mean that you take them away or you lessen them. It just means that how you act upon them or utilize them, you're doing it in a way where you permit more positive and favorable outcomes to happen to you. When you really take a chance and stop and think and look at, why is this happening to me instead of why is this happening for me? When you realize, oh, this is really not about me, or this is bigger than me, or I know I would rather be innocent than trying to prove a point that at the end of the day, what is that going to do for that person? You know, when you start looking at it as, how can this make me better? I assure you, your problems won't even seem like problems like that. And I'm not talking about all problems. I'm just talking about the things like that really make you tick, that you feel like have dominion over you. You know what I mean? I'm not talking about the things that you can't control, you know, or like devastating things. I'm not talking about that, because then that goes into grief and how you need to process that just on your own terms. You know what I mean? No one can tell you how to grieve. So I'm not talking about more intense things like that. I'm just talking about the day-to-day stuff. Interactions with other people, the situations that you go through on a regular basis, the environments that you're in 24/7, how you adapt, how you assimilate. You have to put yourself in a situation to evolve. Because your circumstances may not change, but how you can shift out of them is if you change. You be that mutant gene that once you do, and think about what happens with a mutant gene. Once it arises, it then multiplies, you know, but it has to be forced into a situation of evolution. I can't think of all the scientific terms because that escapes me. That was years ago. But when it's under those conditions where that mutant gene forcibly has to evolve, it metastasizes, almost like a cancer, you know, kind of like only the strongest survive type of mindset. When you think of like in the animal kingdom, not all animals are the strongest. So being that the strongest survive, or the most decorative animal gets the mate, or, you know, like when it's mating season and they have all those special features and stuff like that, like the most profound, the ones that stand out, the ones that rise above, those are the ones that are able to elevate. You can't be common in this instance. You can't be common. You have to be better. You have to think different, do different. Yeah, that's a moral obligation if you want things to be better. So that concludes this week's episode of Talk to Tat. Real people, real talk, real life. I wanted to make sure that you knew it's okay to be in a bind, because you don't have to stay in it. And you don't have to think of it as such. Instead of looking at it as a complicated situation where you are limited, you are restricted, forces have control over you, you can look at it as you have the utmost control. You have self-control, something that no one can take away from you, which means you have the power to change your outlook on everything so that those things that once had an impact on you no longer do. And that all starts in your mind and just practice. So if you were able to take something from this week's video, I am elated. And if you want me to touch on more layers of this topic, please share that in the comments. I would so appreciate it. If you do have any ideas that you would like for me to talk about on the show, please share those as well, because I'm more than happy to touch on things like we're talking about stuff that people may have conversations about alone amongst themselves, or you know what I mean, in their own head. So this show is to put those things out there, because all of this stuff matters. How we interact with one another and how we carry ourselves, those things are important, and everything has some type of relativity to it. So I hope you tune in next time. I will have another video coming soon. I would like for you guys to like and subscribe as well. Please don't forget to follow me on TikTok at Tatiana_Monet. Follow the Instagram to this podcast it's at _ talk to tot. And also on Apple Podcasts as # talk to tot. Streaming on YouTube as Talk to Tot. And then if you would like to follow my personal Instagram page, it's Tatiana Monet, just straight. So I do appreciate you guys. I love y'all. And I hope that you're able to activate some of the concepts that I've talked about if they apply to you. And I know some, like, my content is for anyone, not for everyone. And I'm okay with that. You know what I mean? So until next time, I will see you guys later. Thank you. Bye.